It's time for love. It's time for your love coach. Let's find out if you're ready for love. Here's your marvelous host, Nikki Lee.
Hello, and welcome to Ready for Love Radio. This is your host and love coach, Nikki Lee. Today, we are going to talk about living a fantastic life. Now, people are going to go, what is she talking about this time? Now, seriously, that is the name of one of the books of the author that I've got on the show today, The Secrets to Living a Fantastic Life. And you know what? We were just talking about being happy to wake up and open your eyes and see the sunshine every morning. And you all know, that I say that frequently on the show. And my guest agrees with me about that theory, y'all, so I'm just going to warn you, we're going to hear positivity on the show tonight. So Dr. Lycka, it's awesome to have you with me. How are you today?
I am fantastic. Thank you for the privilege of being on your show.
I love it. See, I like positivity, and I figure there's enough negativity in the world, so I like to have positivity on the show and helping people to find out how they can make their life more positive, and if there are things that they need to work on in their life, how we can help them to find out how they can do that. And I think you can help me with that. What do you think?
Well, I hope so. I think, there's a lot to living a life with positiveness. You can wake up every day and be miserable, but what does that get you? Does it really help?
Well, that's it. I mean, I haven't found, I tried that for a short time, and it just didn't help anything. I just didn't find that it helped anything. I really didn't. But let me tell y'all, Dr. Lycka has a huge bio, which will be on the show page, okay? But let me give you some of the details. He is acknowledged as a leading expert in living a fantastic life and turning points. He's a transformational, sought-after TEDx speaker, 3-time best-selling author, winner of the coveted Philly Award for best-selling author, thought leader, life-changing coach, and mentor. He was misdiagnosed with ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease, in 2003, and after additional research discovered he had chronic Lyme's disease. He's treated and practiced, and after that, he treated and practiced for another 16 years as a cosmetic dermatologist. And he retired in 2019 to embark on a new career to help others overcome adversity the way he did. I was reading through your stuff, and it's like, he had this long career as a dermatologist, and he started a whole other one after that. So, let me see. And you helped develop laser-assisted liposuction. I can't pronounce that. It says an advanced body sculpture technique, and it sounds like, you had an incredible career as a cosmetic dermatologist. So it's not like you were a slacker when you were a doctor, and then you're doing these things to help people to change and restructure their lives in other ways, even after you were a doctor. So this is interesting how you're helping people to transform their bodies and their lives as a doctor, and now transform their lives in a different way after you were a doctor. That's interesting. I like that.
all I can say is it's been a wonderful journey, and I've been blessed with the opportunity to help so many people.
I like that. Well, and it's awesome to be able to take our experiences and help others, and it's like I love doing my show, and I love being able to help other people with it. But I've grown so much through the show, and I just hope, and I really hope that the listeners believe me when I say this, I hope they've grown even a fraction as much through the show as I personally have. And you've got a podcast. What do you think? Do you feel the same way?
I'm so lucky to have so many wonderful guests. I can't help but grow because of them. They have lived so many wonderful experiences, and they share those experiences on my podcast and my syndicated radio show. So it truly has been a wonderful journey to have them on, and an honor and a privilege to have them on.
Exactly. Well, and we get to nitpick and choose who we have, So, and I tell the listeners, I said, drop me notes and tell me what y'all want to hear. I mean, I pick what interests me and what I'm excited about, because it's easier to have a show when you're excited about the topics. But I also, a lot of times when people drop me notes and talk to me and this kind of thing and express certain things they're concerned about, that does have an impact on who I bring on the show, because I know that people want to hear about certain things, and of course then people that reach out to me and say they'd like to be a guest, but I just think it's fascinating, the knowledge that we gather and learn, and how much we grow as the host, and like I said, I know people that listen every week, and I hope that they've grown as much as I have. I really do. I think it's amazing. I love it. I just love it. I wish I'd grasped that side of it years and years before I started the show. I probably would have done this a lot sooner. But so what made you get into medicine? Why did you start that?
That is quite a journey. I always wanted to do the best at what I could, and when I went through university, I looked at all the things and I said, geez, I probably could help people the most as being a doctor. And it became something that I really, really strove after. Now, medicine was extremely competitive to get into, so you had to work very, very hard. Only one person who out of 1,000 that applies to get into medicine actually makes it. So it truly is a real difficult path.
Wow, okay. I knew there was a lot of competition. I didn't know it was that bad, though. Okay. All right. And you were in medicine for like 40 years, right?
I graduated from medicine in 1983, and I walked away in 2019. So it was close to 40 years. Okay.
So why cosmetic dermatology?
When I walked into the first dermatologist's office that I was ever into, I said, geez, this is one of the most amazing things. These doctors can make the difference in people's lives. Now, when I went into dermatology and studied at the University of Minnesota from 1986 to 1989, dermatology was changing. And we started getting the tools that would really help people transform their bodies and their lives. We started getting lasers, for example. We started getting a material called Botox that was helping people to get their wrinkles taken away. We started getting materials called filling substances. So with those coming on board, I just adapted to them and I started getting into them. We started doing liposuction totally under local anesthesia. which was brand new back then. Most people thought you had to put a person to sleep to do liposuction. Well, certain doctors proved that wasn't necessary, so it really became a whole different way of doing things. And so with each innovation, I wanted to learn more and more and more. And I was the leader of the pack in many of these things. I got into many of these things before anybody else was. I was a rapid adapter.
Interesting. I didn't realize, it's interesting looking back that was the time period when those things started. But yeah, that's true. Interesting. Okay. Now I watched your TEDx talk, and there was something. Let me see if I can give you an intro to get you to say what I want you to say here. You were saying something about the responsibility of a cosmetic doctor. And it's not just to change the appearance of the patient. There was something else that the doctor needs to do.
Well, I said you really need to take into account what's right for them. I really need to take into account that they're, it's not only making people look beautiful. It really is not all about that. It's really about what's right for them and making sure that you're doing what's right for them.
True. What about mentally?
Well, there are many people in this world that shouldn't get cosmetic surgery because
True.
They're not mentally appropriate for them. And to just think that in so many, and it's thought that all a person has to do is go into a doctor's office and you'll transform their lives. That's not necessarily true. There are cases where you basically help people, but there are also places you can harm people by doing that.
Exactly. Well, and the thing is, they need to not only look beautiful, but they need to understand and feel beautiful once the changes are done. They need to grasp what all of us are seeing that was done to them. And am I explaining that right?
Yeah, there was a doctor who was one of the first plastic surgeons, and his name was Maxwell Martz. And Maxwell Martz realized there were some people that he did cosmetic surgery on, and they'd look in the mirror and they'd say, "Doctor, you didn't do anything." And yet there was such undeniable proof that they looked so much better after their cosmetic surgery. So everybody has this facade, this image in their mind on what they should look like. And some people cannot see the changes even when they're there. So Maxwell Martz started a science called Psychocybernetics, which was a whole new branch of psychology where he helped people to realize that it's not all about just looking better. It's about feeling better and knowing what you do.
Right. And what was that called?
Psychocybernetics.
I like it. I never heard of that before, but I've heard of the concept. I just never knew what it was called. See, we learn cool things when we ask questions. Awesome. Yeah, well, I've heard stories of people that have all of these procedures done, and they're never happy, and it's like they take it too far.
I've seen that sometimes in these people in the press, the person that looks like a Catwoman and the person that looks like a Barbie doll. And that is that is wrong. That is way going over to the extreme.
Right. Well, and is that, so, you can't say conclusively, but is that sometimes the indication of the person that just can't, quote unquote, see their real selves?
I think many of them, it becomes an obsession where they want more and more
right.
and more. And that is not necessarily healthy either.
Right. Interesting. But, I mean, anything can become an obsession, and you just have to take it too far. So, interesting. I don't know. I think sometimes people, too, don't realize we only have one body, you know? So, all right. So, now you were doing all this work, and you were on the cutting edge, and things were obviously going well, okay? And I'm guessing it was pretty lucrative because, you know, anybody that I've talked to that was in this field, it's good money. So, but, you know, money's not everything. At least that's my theory. So why did you leave that career and write How to Live a Fantastic Life?
You know, my life changed, interestingly enough, in 2003 when I was walking with my wife in Disneyland, the happiest place on earth.
Right.
And my wife turned to me and she said, "What's wrong with you, hon?" And I was taken aback because once in my life I hadn't said anything wrong. I hadn't done anything wrong. I haven't even thunk anything wrong. But my wife persisted. She said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "I don't know, dear. What's wrong with me?" She said, "Listen to your foot." I said, "Really? What do you mean, listen to my foot?" She said, "Listen to it." Well, my right foot had suddenly and mysteriously developed a right foot trouble. It was flapping on the pavement with each step I was taking. Now, your brain is designed to lift your foot up with each step so you don't trip and fall. Well, my foot wasn't doing that. So something had gone wrong. She said, "Did you have a stroke?" I said, "Dear, if I have a stroke, I'd probably be lying on the pavement, muttering something unintelligible."
Right.
So she said, "When you get back, you better get this checked out." Now, when your wife tells you to get something checked out, what do?
You better get it checked out.
You better, if you know what's good for you. So I got it checked out. I started seeing doctors, and you know, I saw some doctors, and then I saw some more, and they referred me to more doctors and more doctors and more doctors. There were hundreds of doctors that I'd seen by the end of the day. They did CAT scans. They did brain scans. They even did scans. And you know what they showed at the end of the day?
No.
They showed absolutely nothing. The doctors were flabbergasted. They didn't know what to say. They thought I had a brain tumor or a slipped disc or something, but they couldn't find anything.
I've been in those situations. That is frustrating.
So you know what doctors do when they can't find anything?
Sometimes they send you home.
Sometimes they send you home. Sometimes they say you're crazy. But most of the time, any doctor that's worth his salt does more tests and more tests and more tests. And they're looking for an answer. And I think the doctors even invented tests that didn't even exist back then. So at the end of the day, they still couldn't find anything. So they sent me to a world-leading neurologist. Now, a neurologist is a brain guy. He's the guy that knows all the answers to complex neurological questions. So what he did was I walked in and I said hi. He said hi back. "You better be sitting down when I tell you this." I said, "Why?" "I've got a dropped right foot." He said, "No, you don't. You have ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Get your affairs in order because in 6 months you're going to be dead." I was taken aback. I said, "Is there a way to prove this diagnosis?" He said, "Of course, on autopsy." That doctor had no bedside manner, as you can see. So I walked out. I slammed the door, and I was angry. I said, I'm not going to die to prove you wrong.
Mm.
But when you go through something like this, you go through the phases of death and dying that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote in her book on death and dying. You go through anger. It's because you're angry at the world. Why? You've been told you're going to die.
Yeah.
You go through bargaining. Oh God, please don't let this happen. I will do anything if you don't let this happen. You go through denial. There's nothing wrong. I can do anything. There's nothing wrong. But my right foot was still dropping. And then my right hand started not working right. It literally couldn't lift up the surgical instruments that I could before. But I was smart. I became a left-handed doctor.
There you go.
Back then there weren't even left-handed tools, so I invented left-handed tools to make it happen. But, you know, at the end of the day, you're still going through all this, and a lot of times you get depressed. Now, when you were going through what you were going through, did you become depressed?
I didn't, but I had, I guess, the benefit of mine happened so fast. I mean, I had maybe 3 hours to absorb what was happening to me.
Yeah, so you didn't go through all those stages, but many people...
I was more shell-shocked. Yeah,
when many people go through these difficult things, they go through depression. And literally, the days are black, the nights are black. And if you're clinically depressed, you know, life has no meaning. You can stay in bed all day and stare at the ceiling and say, why should I do anything? I'm going to die anyhow. You know, and then that is the difficulty with depression. It's a very ugly, dark place. You know, I had seen people die of ALS. It's a terrible death. And I wasn't going to go down that path. You know, I was even going to kill myself before that happened. But I went to my wife and I said, dear, what do I have? And she said, I don't have the faintest idea. But you're smart. You'll figure it out. I said, how can I? I've seen hundreds of doctors. They couldn't figure it out. Well, she said, perhaps you haven't seen the right doctor yet.
Right.
So what I did then is something brand new was invented in the early 2000s. It's called the Internet. You ever hear of that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how that was only 20 years ago and how it's changed the world in that short period of time. But back then, you had to get on with dial-on connections because you couldn't get on. We didn't have Dr. Google. We didn't have computers like we had today. Your phone would go on a cradle, and it would go, ria, 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 for like 20 minutes, and then finally you'd connect. And when you connected, you only could get on with a language like DOS because computers had no memory back then. So you had to use these primitive languages to communicate. Now, I had friends that were nerds that could help me out, and they did. But back then, the Internet is just like now. It's full of the best resources, but it's also full of garbage cans. And you can't tell the garbage cans from the great resources that are there. But the good thing is my friends navigated it. And we found a doctor in Colorado Springs, Colorado, who had a story very similar to mine. His name was David Martz. And what was unique about him is he got worse much more rapidly. And so he was on his deathbed within weeks of his diagnosis. And he was so well known and so beloved that doctors from around the world were coming up to see him. And Dr. Martz was lying on his deathbed when a doctor from Texas by the name of Dr. Harvey came up, and he told him, David, I don't think you have ALS. David said, what do I have? The doctor from Texas said, I think you've been bitten by a tick, and I think you have chronic Lyme's disease. And I think if I start you on treatment, I can make you rapidly better. Well, David said, what do I have to lose? I'm dying.
Exactly.
So
might as well try.
he started him on treatment. And like Lazarus, he arose from the dead. Within 2 weeks, he was back to normal. It was amazing. And
awesome.
I knew I had to get in touch with David because of the amazing things that happened to him. So I phoned every hospital in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I got in touch with him at the Methodist hospital. And we talked, and he talked for hours. He said, "Can you come down and see me?" I said, "When?" He said, "What about right now?" I said, "David, it's Thanksgiving in Canada. My wife's invited 50 people over. She's going to be very mad at me." He said, "You know, aren't there any planes in Canada?" So that's when I decided to come down. I went to my wife. I apologized, saying I wasn't going to be there for Thanksgiving. And she was mad. She said, "You know, hon, you're always away. You're always helping people. I don't know why you have to go away for Thanksgiving." I said, "Well, because of the fact that there's a doctor in Colorado Springs, Colorado that claims he can help me." That's when she did a 180-degree turn.
Exactly.
Said, "I will pack the bags for you. I will even get you to the airport. Come on, you're wasting time." So I ended up in Colorado Springs. I got on a flight from Edmonton to Denver. It was a beautiful flight. But then I got on a flight from Denver to Colorado Springs, which was a rinky-dink puddle jumper. Have you ever been on a rinky-dink puddle jumper?
Oh, yeah, my first flight ever. Yep.
Then you know what I'm talking about. But for the audience, I'm going to describe it. These planes are small, and because they're small, they get affected by weather a lot more than the big planes. And so this plane would fly along, and then it would drop 100 feet without warning.
Yes,
and then
they do.
Climb back up, and then it would drop 200 feet without warning. And then it would climb back up, and then it would drop 300 feet without warning. It was like the drop of doom over and over and over again.
Yes. And I don't like roller coasters, but I tell you what, those things are like no roller coaster you've ever been on.
No,
yes.
And you know, this was a 15-minute flight, but it was the flight from hell. And
yes.
when I got off, I was green. And there was Dr. Martz on the tarmac to meet me. You see, back then, they hadn't imposed all the restrictions that go on now. It was just the early 2000s, and they hadn't put in all the high security. But it was, when I got off, there was David on the tarmac to meet me. And he said, "Dr. Lycka, you don't look so good." And I said, "I don't feel so good." And he said, "That's probably a metaphor for what you've been going through." And I said, "You're probably right." And we talked for hours, and he said some magic words. He said, "Dr. Lycka, I think history is repeating itself. I think I can make you better." And the beautiful thing is, he started me on treatment, and that's how I was able to continue as a leading cosmetic doctor until 2019, when I decided to walk away. But you know, when you go through something like this, you decide to change. You either change for the better or you change for the worse. And I've seen people change for the worse, and it doesn't help them at all. But if you change for the better, you can make a difference in society. And that's when I asked myself 3 questions. I said, did I live? Did I love? And did I really matter? And I decided to make my life something different. And so I started to give back. And I started to sponsor an event called Women of Distinction for the YWCA in Edmonton. And that event honored women in society. As you probably realize, even today, women do not get the kudos and all the honor that they should. So it was something that I decided to make a difference, and I became the person that helped with that a lot. And there, a wonderful lady by the name of Harriet decided to apply for an award. The award was a Turning Point Award, and the award was in a category that where a person has changed their life around. You see, Harriet was a world-leading model, She'd walk the cat ropes in New York and Milan and Paris, but after a short period of time, she got tired of the industry because it's a dog-eat-dog breakfast in that industry, and she decided she wasn't going to be in it anymore. So she decided to pursue her second love, which was accounting. And she went to the University of Calgary in Calgary, Alberta. And there she was befriended by a person that turned out to be a psychopath. And that psychopath ended up kidnapping her, stabbing her, and leaving her for dead. So the story gets better from there, though. Harriet ended up in the hospital. She doesn't know how she got there. But when she got there, she met a little girl by the name of Amber. Now, Harriet was moping and crying and being miserable about the things that had happened to her. And this little girl called Amanda decided to ask her, "What's your story, Harriet?" And Harriet told her. But Amanda immediately gave her hell. She said, "Harriet, I've been in something far worse. I was in a car accident where I lost both my parents, and I've lost use of my legs." But she said, "I'm going to do something out of my life. I'm going to make a difference." And she said, "I challenge you to do the same thing." So Harriet was challenged to do something. That's why she had applied for the Women of Distinction Award. And that's where she decided to make a difference. And she applied for the award, not to win the award, but to meet me and convince me to write a book. And that's where we wrote the book, The Secrets to Living a Fantastic Life Together. And that's where we put it together. And it came out at the early part of 2020, where the world was changing. I mean, a pandemic had struck us. And,
yeah, definitely.
You know, the book immediately became a bestseller. An international became a bestseller. And it is an award-winning book as well. So I'm very pleased we were able to help a lot of people with that book. And we still continue to help people every day. Because in that book, Harriet and I write about the 13 golden pearls that are found in each and every one of us that can make a significant difference in people's lives. Now, do you know what causes a pearl to form?
It's the irritation of the sand being inside the oyster, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you know, in the South Pacific, there actually are golden pearls that exist. They get a little grain of sand in them, and they produce golden pearls. And those golden pearls are exquisite. In fact, a single solitary golden pearl costs upwards of $10,000. Now,
wow.
The golden pearls that Harriet and I found in each and every one of us are even more valuable than that. And the beautiful thing is they are inside of you. All you have to do is look inside and find them, that they're there.
Awesome. I like that. So do you help us in the book learn how to discover them within ourselves, I'm guessing?
Well, you know, each chapter in the book, I'm just going to pull it over here, each chapter in the book is based on a golden pearl. So It starts with chapter 1, which is love. And the last chapter, which is chapter 13, is empowerment. So it takes you on a journey to find those golden pearls inside yourself. Now, each chapter is written in a different form of way. It is written so that you can look at this. So the first chapter is love. And love is the most beautiful thing in the world. You know, it's one of those things that you get more of just by giving more of. And that's the beautiful thing about it. So it starts with a quotation, and I'm going to read that quotation to you so you can experience that. Love. I believe that dreaming is stronger than reality. Desire is more potent than apathy. Hope is more powerful than despair. Joy always triumphs over sorrow. That laughter is the ultimate cure for mankind's foibles. And I believe that love is stronger than hate, the greatest gift of all.
Okay, so positivity is more powerful than negativity.
It always is if we give it a chance.
Right. Definitely. Definitely. I agree. You know, I just finished writing a book with somebody, and we searched and searched to have a quote to put at the beginning of every chapter, and it's amazing how powerful it is as you're going through and finding just the right quote to put at the beginning, you know. And even we had some left over, and we had examples and case studies and stuff that we put at the end, and then some of the quotes that we had left over we put at the end of each of the chapters too, because we had so many. I said, we're not going to just throw them out, you know. So, oh gracious. So tell me, what do you think was your most important lesson that you learned from having an incorrect diagnosis?
My most important lesson is that it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens. That,
yeah.
You know, if I had just listened to the doctor, I would have probably be dead right now, just like David Martz was. But the point is, I didn't listen. I kept on looking for the right diagnosis and the right thing. You know, you were fortunate that you had a doctor that said, oh, well, there's a dissecting aneurysm, and we can operate on it. Yeah. I've heard from many other patients that their doctor told them, yes, you have a dissecting aneurysm, but there's nothing we can do about it. And you're, you know, just go home and die. You know,
well, and
I wouldn't accept that diagnosis. I would look for another opinion and see if somebody would operate, because you're going to die anyhow. You might as well die trying to fix the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I to this day think that, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but John Ritter had the very same condition, and he was misdiagnosed. And by the time they figured out what was really wrong with him, it was too late. Because, I mean, you know the time span with this, that you have to find the problem and fix it. And for some reason, I got more than that time, thank goodness. But due to his misdiagnosis and him dying from it, his widow actually started a foundation that has done a whole lot of things to increase the education, the research, and this kind of thing. And that has helped so that a lot of doctors and a lot of students are learning much, much more, and the way a lot of hospitals are handling the diagnosis and the testing and this sort of thing has changed dramatically since his death. And I really credit that in her efforts with the fact that more of us are surviving, more of us are living longer. And I really think on some level that is, and it's to her credit that I survived. That may or may not be, but I really think that's part of the reason. So, you know, if she hadn't been as proactive as she is and hadn't worked as hard as she had to push the education factor and for changes and all that, it's very possible I wouldn't be here. Because, I mean, statistically, and the doctors to this day don't understand how I survived. Because I shouldn't be here, and I know that. So, but thank goodness somebody finally found what the problem was. But, not to get overly dramatic, but...
No, and you should be dramatic, because truly that's a terrible diagnosis for anybody to have. And if people, if you're having chest pain, my goodness, don't just accept it. Go get it checked out.
Yeah. Well, and my chest pain lasted all of like a minute. That was it. There was no more chest pain after that. And I should not have waited to 5 weeks to go to the doctor, and anytime I tell the story, I tell people, listen, do not ever do that, because that literally should have killed me. It should have. The waiting was crazy. If I'd had any idea what was going on, I never would have done that. But knowing the hospital I went to and knowing how hard a time they had finding the problem, and they actually missed it the first time on the CT. If one of the test results hadn't been, one of the tests they did, a test result of 60 showed that I had heart failure. My test result was 3,600. Obviously, I was having heart failure. If that test result hadn't been so bad, I'm not sure they would have gone back and kept searching so hard and so long to find the problem. I'm not sure they would have found it earlier. I'm really not. So it was clear something was wrong with my heart, but, I'm not sure they would have found it. So I'm not sure how they missed tears from, my aorta was shredded. I'm not sure how they missed it, but they did. But I'm here. Like I said, that's bottom line. That's the important part. So, as a doctor, okay, and being a doctor and seeing a misdiagnosis after all those tests, because you had an insane number of tests done, and having somebody, and I know what it's like to have a doctor look you in the eye and say, you're going to die, okay? It's hard to explain that feeling to somebody. How as a doctor does that make you see the medical profession? Did it change that for you?
It doesn't, because I know that doctors are humans, and I know they make mistakes.
Okay.
And I know that a doctor can only know what he knows. He cannot know what he does not know. And
Sure.
Back in the early 2000s, no one had heard of chronic Lyme's disease. And in fact, even now people argue that it doesn't exist. So, things like that happen. But again, it's the responsibility of every patient to look for their proper answers and not accept things when they're there.
Yeah, that's something that I've said to every person I know, and can't say loud enough, is you've got to be an advocate for yourself. I'm not saying be a pain in the neck to the doctors, but if I don't feel comfortable with something that's being done, or if a doctor just will not listen, and I've got enough stuff going on that I keep very, very close eye on what's going on. Thank goodness years ago I used to work at a hospital, and I took a terminology course so that I had, at least when I read reports, I have some clue what they're saying, and then I make sure the doctors explain it to me in more detail. But I stay as up to date as a patient without medical training can. And I keep up with the details of where I'm at with everything and all that sort of thing. So if a doctor just seriously will not listen to my input, I make sure I go to somebody else, because I figure it's my body. I'm aware of what's going on, and I need a doctor that's actually gonna pay attention. And it's all of my doctors have this thing that when I go to a new doctor, they literally say I scare them, and I've gotten to the point I'm like, okay, so you understand the situation. This is good. We can move forward, So I figure if reading my medical history doesn't scare them, then they haven't fully grasped the situation. So, all right. I tell you what, do you want to give the listeners information on how they can find more about you?
Yeah, I would love everybody to go to my website, drallenlycka.com. That's DRALLEN, Lycka, LYCKA.com. There's a lot of wonderful things for you there. If you'd like to learn more about my syndicated radio show, it's called How to Live a Fantastic Life. It's on AM, FM 24/7, and it's also on my website, so you can find it there. So, and if you'd like to get a copy of my book, it's also on my website. Now, I also offer a free 15-minute consultation for people. And if that's too much for you, if you think that's too big of a step, write Tammy, my girl, on the site a couple of questions, and I'd be glad to answer them on the air for you so that we can help you find a better life. So I'm here to help you to the best of my ability and to serve you better.
Awesome. I like that, answering them on air. That's very good. All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
And listeners, I'll be with you next time on Ready for Love Radio.